What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder, where we talk all things Marvel and MCU. I'm your host, Warren Thompson, and Miss Marvel Episode 4 is dropping tonight. Or tomorrow, for normal people. But we will be watching it tonight, and I will be doing my watch party as well. That starts at 11:30 Pacific time. And I'm really excited to see where Miss Marvel is going, because I believe, and there are some rumors going around as well stating this, that the Inhumans could be introduced in Miss Marvel, and the X-Men possibly set up as well. I think this show is going to be a lot more important than we realize. Now, right off the bat, I do want to state that Miss Marvel is a very important show on its own without the introduction of the Inhumans or X-Men. Miss Marvel is going to lead up to Secret Invasion, and it's also going to lead up to the Marvels. So right away, it's already a very important show, and Miss Marvel is going to be a very big superhero in the MCU for years to come. But I do believe that there is more here than we actually realize. And they started to show that in the last episode, where they showed that the bangle was taken from a Cree. Also, when Kamala was training, Bruno mentioned that the power wasn't actually coming from the bangle, it was coming from inside of her, and the bangle simply unlocked the power. So the bangle kind of acted like the Terrigen Mist. And we've all thought that Marvel kind of changed the backstory for Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, not making her an Inhuman, but what if she actually still is an Inhuman? I think this could still be a possibility, and I think this could be a gateway for Marvel to introduce the Inhumans to the MCU, but in a different way that we know. And the reason for this change, no Terrigen Mist, no Inhumans on Earth right now, and I'll explain this in a bit, could be because of the X-Men and Mutants coming to the MCU. I think there's some connections here, and I think that Miss Marvel is the start, so let's dive into this. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the latest MCU news. Now, if you're a super huge Marvel fan like me, you are probably thinking the same thing. Marvel can only go so long without introducing the Inhumans and the X-Men in the MCU. They are incredibly important characters in Marvel Comics, and the stories that happen in Marvel Comics are incredibly important as well, that revolve around the Inhumans and the X-Men. And we already know, Kevin Feige has already said that the X-Men and the Mutants are coming to the MCU. He said this back in 2019 at San Diego Comic-Con. However, we haven't really gotten any mention of the Inhumans, that is, until Kevin Feige said that he was kind of open for anything if the story fits, and then, spoiler alert by the way, for Multiverse of Madness, we saw Black Bolt as a part of the Illuminati. And of course, Professor X. So, Marvel Studios can only go so long until they actually introduce the X-Men and the Inhumans in our main timeline, because Doctor Strange now knows that they exist. But they could be coming sooner than you think, especially the Inhumans. And I think, and again, rumors are going around, that it could happen in Miss Marvel. Right now, some rumors are going around that the Universal Inhumans could appear in Miss Marvel, and that the royal family could possibly be on the moon. And if this is true, I presume they are at Adelon. And this actually makes sense if you kind of think about it in terms of introducing the Inhumans and X-Men. Now, right away, since the promotion for Miss Marvel started and we found out that her powers are kind of changed, we assumed that she wasn't going to be an Inhuman. And nobody at Marvel Studios has come out and said, oh yeah, she's an Inhuman. That could be a big spoiler, so they're not just going to come out and say that if that's the case. So keep in mind, just because they haven't actually said she's an Inhuman doesn't mean that she's not. So we assumed they changed her story, but what if they actually didn't? Sure, they changed some of it, but what if that Inhuman part is still the same? Now, keep in mind, and if you don't know this, it's important to know, the Inhumans were created by the Cree. The Cree did genetic experiments on humans. And then, of course, with the newer Inhumans, the Terrigen Mist activates their powers and their genes. In fact, in the origin story in the comics for Miss Marvel, it is the Terrigen Mist that activates the powers inside of Kamala. That obviously did not happen, but what if they simply switched that? What if instead of the mist, it was actually the bangle? Bruno did say that the bangle simply activated the power that was already inside of her. That's kind of a play on what the mist did. It's very clear that the power is in her genes. It is coming from her. Now, this is kind of what separates the mutants from the Inhumans, the whole activation of the powers. Now, it's very clear that the Kree are going to be involved in some way, shape, or form with Miss Marvel. Last episode, it was revealed that Kamala's great-grandmother got the bangle from a Kree. They also mentioned that there was supposed to be another bangle, pretty much confirming that these are indeed the Negabands, originally in the comics given to Mar-Vell, not Captain Marvel, but Captain Mar-Vell by the Supreme Intelligence. So the Kree have been around for a very, very long time on Earth. We knew that already. So the origin of them experimenting on humans would make sense. This is how we get the Inhumans. And of course, in the comics, these experiments would have babies, and those babies would eventually go on to have the same Inhuman Inhuman genes, and their powers would later on be activated. But what if Kamala is the only Inhuman on Earth, with the exception of her family? But I'm talking about activated Inhumans with powers. What if all of them are on the moon? And what if there are a lot more in other parts of the universe? You see, in the comics, the Kree didn't just experiment on humans. They experimented on other alien races as well. And the experiments were actually designed to look different because they were supposed to look like different species so they could blend in and infiltrate other species and groups. The Kree created the Inhumans to fight the Skrull during the Kree Skrull War, which we are leading up to with Secret Invasion and the Marvels. And here's the connection to the X-Men and the MCU and why the Inhumans actually being on the moon and other parts in space is kind of important. It's so people can actually differentiate between Inhumans and mutants. Look, for us superfans, we know the difference between X-Men and Inhumans, but to the normal viewer, they might not understand the difference too well. So by having the Inhumans on the moon and in other parts of the universe, this kind of makes the Inhumans seem like an alien race, in which some of them actually are. But it really helps differentiate the Inhumans from the X-Men, which we know are coming, so this seems like it's very intentional if the Inhumans are indeed on the moon at Adelon. And Secret Invasion and the Marvels are supposed to be really big projects coming from Marvel Studios. And keep in mind, the MCU did kind of switch things up a little bit in the first Captain Marvel film. The Skrull are typically bad in the comics, but in the MCU, they're apparently good. And the Kree are evidently bad. So they reversed it on us. However, I am assuming that there are still bad Skrull and there are good Kree. But we've already seen some of the brainwashing and manipulation done to Carol Danvers by the Kree, so we can actually assume that some other experiments have gone down with the Kree on humans and other species. These would be the Inhumans. And if the Kree, in the MCU that is, not the comics, did truly create them to help in the Kree Skrull War, it would only make sense that we would see them in Secret Invasion and the Marvels. This could be why these two projects coming up are very important to the MCU. Plus, Kevin Feige did say recently that a lot more is going to be revealed in the upcoming months, and we are going to be getting major hints at what the whole big picture is of Phase 4, Phase 5, and beyond. So I am sort of expecting Ms. Marvel to tease this just a little bit, especially since it's going to be going right into the Marvels. And I actually think it's a pretty good idea to make the Inhumans sort of off-planet characters. Pretty much just like the Kree in the MCU. Some of them kind of look normal, but some of them look like aliens. Again, that would be a big way to differentiate the mutants from the Inhumans, so the general public doesn't get too confused, because let's face it, Marvel Studios does have to worry about that. But let me know your thoughts and your best theories about Ms. Marvel and the Inhumans in the comments down below. What do you think we're going to see from Ms. Marvel, and do you think the Inhumans will be off-planet so that they don't get confused with the X-Men and the MCU? Comment down below, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest MCU news. For live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.